Aseer.
Peace.
I'm here with a great young old soul right here. Great young old soul with powerful consciousness and information he had for the people. We're going to go in on ancient KEMET and how it was stolen and stripped from our people. Brother Aseer, introduce yourself.
Peace.
Peace.
Hotep. Salam alaikum. Black Power. Peace to all of those, everybody in the human family, planet Earth. I am Aseer, the Duke of Tears. I've been here for about 1 billion years, as the brother said. So much is going on within the span of history that we as a people sometimes get displaced in it, and we sometimes get very disenfranchised with learning anything that really doesn't have anything to do with what we feel that doesn't have anything to do with us. So the brother asked me to come through and shed some light on some things that I, with the grace of the ancestors, was able to come into knowledge of and to continue on the course. One of those things being the real science of how history or how things usually come into being. We as people tend to sometimes take for granted our human experiences and think that that is only one aspect of ourselves, when really the physical aspect of ourselves is really the last and the smallest part of who we really are. And when one becomes disenfranchised with one's own past or history, one then becomes disenfranchised with their destiny or future experiences. So really the only time that is synonymous to build anything on is the now, which is the ongoing now, the what they call the ever fulfilling moment of the innate understanding of where one's position is in the cosmos. But when I talk about the cosmos all the time, I'm not always talking about space in the upper atmosphere and the ether and all that stuff. I'm talking about the inner space or the inner cosmos that we all dwell in first before we incorporate into a physical, hardened reality. So there is no time that we haven't been here. We as people have to really wrap our minds around the concept. I mean, when you meet people and they talk about they believe in God, and you know, they say that God is omnipotent and is always around and give God the glory for everything, and without God I wouldn't exist. What people don't ask themselves is, well, what God you talking about? And what existence, and what do you mean by exist? You know, existence does not mean living. You know what I mean? It does not equate experience. You know, a couch exists. You know what I'm saying? Yet it only has life when somebody puts their ass in it. You know what I mean? So therefore, when we're talking about living and experience and the ultimate fruition of who we are as a people, we have to get past a lot of the mundane stuff that we as a people in 2007 is still very caught up in, man.
Now, when you say the mundane stuff, I want you to clarify mundane. A lot of our people don't know these terms. They never heard of these terms.
Yes, sir.
What is the mundane stuff?
Mundane is anything that is keeping you from your real self. So whether it's, you know, standing on a corner all night, or whether it's working all day, all night, whether it's being around people you know you don't really need to be around, but you around them to get something out of it, or vice versa. Those people wanting to be around you knowing they can't provide anything for you of substance, but they need whatever energy that they feel you generate from them. We have to understand that our experiences are integral parts of our understanding of God and ourselves, because we are the part. Physicality, dense matter, is the form of physical life that is the only way that God can express itself. See, when we talk about God, we're talking about, well, most people, when they talk about God, I mean, first thing coming to mind is Jesus or Allah or Yahweh or some type of religion. There's no relationship between God and religion. That was created by people they call the Church Fathers around the time that we as original people were trying to figure out if we were going to allow the Caucasian people to be seen as human. So there was a council called the Council of Nicaea in Rome in around 333 AD, right? 33 is what, 9? So we're talking about things being born or things coming into existence. At that conference, which took place maybe about 250 to, let's say, 350 years after the so-called Yahushua Christ walked the earth, right? Realized that there was not a unified religion for people that were not original to have for themselves. Now, when I say original people, I'm talking about those people who have what the Catholic Church would call the mark of the beast, which is melanin. You know what I'm saying? That is the thing that solidifies your existence here as real matter. Because those that read the Kabbalah and things like that, you know, Madonna and these people, they know that life can only incarnate physically through a dark vesture, through a dark animus, meaning the body. Therefore, anything that does not come or that does not have melanin within it then is not technically alive. According to, you know, the ancient Kabbalists like Musa Abulafia and some of these other deep ancient thinkers. So when the Germanian people were coming out of the caves and started to really force their way into civilized society, a religion had to be created for them in order for them to be able to assimilate themselves into the ancient cultures without so much negative strife. Because remember, these are the people at this time that are burning down Rome.
It was to really try to keep their evil, diabolical nature in check, so to speak.
Yeah.
And they still couldn't even live with that.
Yeah, they couldn't even live with that because, like Bobby said, like imagine if they didn't have the book, man. It'd have been a wrap. So we had to give them some form of semblance of culture and understanding of themselves in order for them not to hate themselves enough to be civilized. Because see, they don't hate us because we're black or, you know, we're melanated or whatever you want to call it. They hate us because they're not that. So nobody hates you like your family. You know what I'm saying? So when it came down to the real understanding of how this being was going to eventually come back into the human family, the people that were running the church at this time were people from a place called Carthage in North Africa, and the church fathers at the time were called at the time was the bishop of Carthage or the archbishop of Carthage. He's the one who went to Constantine and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to allow this dude to be seen as human, but in order to do that, we got to allow him to take an aspect of us and put himself in the perspective of God. Now, we knew that he could not be that because he was not there when the All-Father, All-Mother created all that was. So what he had to do was we had to almost create a fiction, a legal fiction, for him to be seen as human and then create laws around that. Now, there were laws prior to this, like the laws of Hammurabi during the time they call the time of Babylon, you know, which was basically a codified index of how you was to deal with those people that weren't considered human beings at the time. So around the time of Rome now, we get into a situation where, first when we say Rome, we're talking about a empire created by original people from different parts of the so-called ancient world on the eastern hemisphere, right? Who got together and set up a trading empire based on hostile takeover.
Rome, what time period did that take place?
Rome. See, that's the thing. Depending on where you get into it, though, because you can't really. Sometimes you can't even really go by the dates that they give you in these history books, because the people that are giving you this history didn't even exist at the time that this thing was getting written down. So that would be like you trying to go to a mechanic who only know how to fix bikes and getting him to try to fix your Escalade or something. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? So sometimes we have to take what, not think so linearly, but we also have to take into account that the margin for error that these people have is greater than we give them credit for. Like, they are not as smart as they put themselves out to be. This is not to say that people, you know, people who happen to be Caucasian and are scholarly in events such as this are not versed in what they're versed in. But they're versed in what they have to be versed in order for them to perpetuate the idea of them being supreme. So based on that, you know, there's a certain degree of trepidation that they're always going to have when dealing with any issue pertaining to us, because you can't deject the people and then big up what makes them great at the same time. You got to keep your foot on them and make them think that the history that they have is not their own. Or the conquered people, right? What do you
don't understand it, brother.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, where did the Caucasian come from? Was he created? How was he created?
Okay. For this segment, I refer to him as it.
Okay, beautiful.
Only because it would represent the forethought that created what we now today call modern Caucasians, but the intent of how he came through came out of a non-physical thing.
Now, when you say it, explain to the viewers what is the it you talking about, because they probably don't hear me.
The it, right. When I refer to the beginnings of the Caucasoid people as it, or the it, or them coming into existence, we have to realize that, okay, we're going to get into a bit of galactic history, right? Now, this is from a lot of the old cosmogonies of some of the old, let's say, Moorish, a.k.a. Native American, a.k.a. Kemetian, a.k.a. Kemetian philosophies and cosmogonies, right? The Montauk had an old prophecy about how the wicked one came into being, right? And it basically was that the mother and the father God got into a argument, basically. And out of the argument, certain discontent was brought about. And when that discontent happened, it materialized in the form of the tears from the Divine Mother. And as she started to cry, her tears became solidified salt. And out of the salt, it was then buried in what they call the hills of the earth. And then as the salt began to germinate itself, it began to come into existence and it began to walk upright. But this salt was made out of the discontent of the All-Mother, right? That's one way of talking about the Yaqub story. Right. See what I'm saying? The Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, peace be upon him, he brought forth the understanding of Yaqub. You know, Yaqub, okay, we know to gleam over it, Yaqub was a black man scientist born around the year 419, how many millions of years ago, came amongst the people when they were dissatisfied, and when they were dissatisfied, he just said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take y'all dissatisfaction and we're going to make a whole nother race of people that are going to rule over your people for all of this time, right? And after X amount of years, 600 years of grafting, here comes the Caucasoid. However, that's true, right? Aspects of that legendary history are true. Because the difference between a myth and a legend is, a myth is something that is so old that you can't say it's true or not. A legend is something based on history with a little bit of embellishment in it, right? So mythical history, or mythical legendary history, is the summation of all of that, right? So we are all of that. So to go into the stars, right? Before we incorporate it into matter here physically, let's say we derive from a place called Sirius, right? Represented by the dog star Anubis or Anpu, right? Yeah, that would be him. Anpu, right? He's the dog. When DMX was talking about where my dog's at and all that, he talking about him, really. You know, anytime anybody talking, hey, what's up, dog? What's up, dog? They're really talking about Anpu, who is Anubis. He also represents Lucifer. He also represents the horn god Pan or Fawn. Whenever you see Caucasoids do this, like in a rock mythos or whatever, and they always like this. Sometimes you see the blood homies do this. This is Baphomet. Well, this is Lucifer. This is Baphomet. That's right. Because they're giving respect really up to Ampu. You know what I'm saying?
Ampu is
Anubis. That was his original name. Right, that was his original name. Ampu is his Comedian name, his Moorish name, and Anubis was the Greek interpreted name.
And I noticed that he's rocking red, black, and green.
Red, black, and green all the time. You know how we do, because it's the same people doing the same stuff, you know?
Check out what the God got on right here.
Right, speaking of Assyrians, right?
You see the red, black, and green on the shoulder pad?
That's right. And in the crook and the flail.
Right.
And in both. See what I'm saying? Because again,
break that down. You talking
flail?
Yeah.
That would be the my bad.
Okay, here you go.
This right here.
And that is called the crook.
Right. Well, this would be the flail, and I believe this is the crook.
And actually, what does that do? What was it for?
This would represent, sometimes you would see sometimes you see Moors and they'll wear tassels, and then where the pheasant has the tassel. Right. The tassel will represent the sun and its rays that come down. So this would represent that in its totality. You know what I mean? Different pharaohs had different numbers of tassels at the end of there. So it depends on which pharaoh it was. Right. This, which we would consider that is where you get the word nigger from. That is the symbol of the word. This is the symbol of the divine king. The divine king is called the Naga, N-A-G-A, or the Naga, or like you get Nagasaki, or Nagumi. All of these terms, this is the term, when they talk about nigga, this is what they really talking about. This is the divine king. This is the Kundalini Shakti energy force that rises from the center of your coccyx all the way up into your midheaven, which is actually your crown chakra, which is God. Talking about the part of yourself that is yearning to be reactivated. You're really talking about your Kundalini Shakti energy that rises up through your divine serpent, which is your spinal column, you know, that rises up to the top and then makes all things divine. So just as I said, sometimes you see dudes do this, right? When I was a little kid, I would see a lot of like goth kids, you know, saying this dude's doing all this, doing all that, wearing the black with the goat's head and all of that. Anytime you see somebody on it like that, they're basically giving respect to you as a black man. But the thing is, we've been trained to believe that that has nothing to do with us, when really that whole religion is based on us. Satan comes from the term Sut ut An, and Sut Sut comes from the word, well, Sut, and then is pre-dynastic Set. So when you had Set, Set was the uncle of Heru, right? So the story in Kemet went that Aseer, which is the homie in green, sometimes you see him in green too.
Right.
He was married to a sister named Aset, who is Isis, and then they had a son. Right? That son became Heru, right? So Heru was symbolic of the falcon, right? So Heru wanted to revenge himself upon his uncle for killing his father, right? His uncle cut his father up into what? 13 pieces, 14 pieces, and then the last one was the phallus that was allegedly ate by the catfish, and then his queen Isis, through alchemy, created a golden phallus for him. Yeah, created a golden phallus for him. The Black Queen created a golden phallus for him that could resurrect him, and then through that he could then have other children. So while this is going on, Heru was fighting for eons against his uncle Set. So it got to the point where he fought him so hard that they reached a stalemate. So what Heru decided to do was, well, what most Moors do, he said, well, I'm going to take him to court. So he took him to Ma'at, who is a symbol of justice, and took her to court, and basically the story goes that he went to the west, and in the west he received the angelic armies that came back and testified for him, and then in that he was able to win the battle and then banish Set to the sunset, which is where you get the term sunset from. He banished them to the dark regions, to the realm of Anubis. So once that happened, Isis, the divine mother, created what we could now call the veil that we're all up under. The veil of Isis, which is basically the immemorial memory that we sometimes fall out of because we've lived for so long. Like when you live, like you as a man or us as regular people, we cannot judge time the way most people judge time, because the trick was to get the immortals to believe that they weren't immortal. And then once they did that, they made us believe that we could die. And then once we believe that we could die, then what happens is, right? Once we believed we could die, then it was a wrap for us, because then what happened was we were now subject to the body. This is what I was saying a little bit before in terms of galactic history, is that before we incorporated into physical matter, we represented the arm, leg, arm, head, the universal mind of God eternally. So ask yourself, well, how could we do that? The way we could do that is this. If you believe in the Most High, if you believe in the Most High, if you believe in the Mother, Father, God, like you say you do, in a little while, thank you, then that means that you know that there's no such thing as death for God. So if you know that the Most High, Mother, Father, God has always existed, right? Then that means that when the Big Bang is what they call, you know, creation coming into existence, when that thing started, there was a point within that fusion, in that explosion, that matter already existed in the mind of what it wanted to create for itself. So that means that in that mind, in that universal mind that was created in that big explosion, in that big understanding of itself and it coming into existence and it realizing that it itself is God and that it can exist in however it wants to exist, that means that we existed in that thought too. Then that means that that thought of existence is what we live in now. Then that means that we've always existed. That means that we were always in that thought. That means that we are basically the part of God that can actualize itself and give back to God through our individual experiences. Yet, within those experiences, in the upper realms, there's no such thing as duality. You dig? It's all one thing. It all exists within itself, and therefore it shall. So there is no need to evolve into something else when you're already there. You see? So what the universal Mother, Father, God loved us so much and loved itself enough to create a small pocket of imperfection in this thing that we would today call creation, and then allow that thing to exist. And then within that imperfection, the goal then is to be born perfect and then find a way to keep perfecting oneself, because once you're perfect, you're dead, because perfection equals stagnation. So there can be no up without down. There can be no sound without thought. You know what I'm saying? So when we began to say, okay, this would be a good place for us to exist, we existed like this. It just wasn't in a dense physical form. The more this part of reality began to get carved out, and when the egregorial anti-spirits that were the negative, or let's say the darker side of the All-Father, All-Mother God started to exist itself, they realized that they wanted to exist too, but they wanted to exist physically, because that was more interesting to them than being perfect, which is great.
Okay, to tie in the Moors culture into ancient Egypt, at the time of the pyramids and Isis and Akhenaten and all that good stuff, where was the Moors at that time? Did they call themselves the Moors, or was it going by another name?
Right.
Because
okay, what? Well, first of all, the word Moor is a verb. So because it's a verb, it is the closest allegory or closest word we can equate to melanin, right? Because it's constantly evolving and constantly becoming something other than what it was before in order for it to be seen as more. See? So who the Moors were historically, right? The Moors were and are the Kemites. The Moors were and are the Oguns. The Moors were and are the ancient Native Americans. The Moors were and are the ancient Chaldeans, Elamites, Canaanites, Sumerians, Abyssinians, Chickasaws, Choctaws. These are what they are, right? However, when they began to deal with other lesser beings, right? The lesser beings, or let's say the Moors, I'm jumping because this is how melanin do. The Moors originally, when they began to codify themselves as Moors, began to be seen as that, they basically were the first original priesthood of Kemet, right? They were also called the Ebers, E-B-E-R-S, in historical anecdotes, right? They were called the Ebers. But what they really were they were the seers that saw maybe 2 million years before Kemet was gonna fall, that it was gonna fall. So what they started to do is they were the ones who started cataloging everything and started writing everything down and putting it in different libraries and spots and all of that, and creating places for it to cohabitate in, right? So they allowed, the Moors were the ones that allowed this thing to exist in its thank you, brother, that allowed it to exist. That's what's up. That's what's up. I feel it too. They were the ones who saw what was going to go down, and before it went down, they were the ones that decided to bounce and take the real knowledge out, and then start creating all of the satellite civilizations around that, and sharing what it was, the prophecies that was going to come down. So a lot of those Moors left ancient Kemet, let's say pre-dynastically now. We're talking about when this is before Osiris. Before Osiris, one of the biggest gods in Kemet was Khonshu.
Now I want to ask you, they didn't call themselves gods.
Nah.
Where does the word God come from?
God actually, in modern eras, came from the term Gad, G-A-D, which was one of the original tribes of Kemet that left before things got hectic. But God is also a placeholder for a word that can't even be spoken anymore. You know what I mean? Because we as original people have not only forgotten it, we have allowed other names to supplant the divine name, you know? When really God is representative of the individual to the collective. So if I'm talking, if I call you on the phone and say, hey, what's up, Soneto? I say, hey, what's up, God? I'm talking to God. You see what I'm saying? I'm talking to you. Yet at the same token, if you call me and say the same thing, you're talking to God, because we're basically redistributed energy that is here to validate each other. And our experiences is what collectively makes us God. So when we are all, let's say, at a X-Clan concert, and we all talking about Black Power this, Black Power that, that's God in one voice manifest. See what I'm saying? Same way in Kemet, like I said, when the Moors started to really realize what was going on, the original Ebers, or the Moors that left, they were basically the high priests and priestesses that lived in Kemet at the time, and that seen what was going down. And because they knew that certain things have to happen in order for us to evolve to the next level, it had to go down that way, but certain information was taken out, so that way when the invaders came, you know, which was really their cousins, you know what I'm saying, they lighter skin or they darker skin cousins, yeah, because at the time there is no Caucasian people, there's no Mexican people, there's no Chinese people, there's no Puerto Rican people, none of those people exist except us, black men and black women. The people that today they call natives, that we look at and at like Indian powwows and stuff, they didn't even exist then. None of these people existed at this time. This is just us. And I don't even mean so-called African people, per se. I'm talking about those original people from this part of the hemisphere right here. Those black people or Moorish people or Native people or Aboriginal people look like us, you know, and maybe the Aborigines in Australia, you know, maybe some of them. But specifically us, we realized that things was going to go down. And when these things go down, sometimes they have to happen in order for us to evolve on a spiritual level as a whole. So how we do it, we see the future before it happens, then we write it down, then we let it happen, then we send somebody back that remembers, right? We send somebody back that remembers, then we allow the judgment to go down. And then once the judgment go down, then we know, okay, now it's the time for us to redistribute our wealth and come back up. What's up, homie? So when these things happen, we as original people, Moors, or the Kemites, or what we would say the Kaf Moors, or the Moors, right? KMR, just like TMR means the Moors, or Kemesian Moors, like Chem Moors, right? All of these are different words for the same thing. So specifically though, around the time of, let's say, the first dynasty of Kemet, right? There was a history, show you how the Caucasian scholars do it. History says that the whole thing was started, that the first Kemesian dynasty was started by this dude named Narmer, or Menes, right? That's true. It's right, correct. It's right in the sense that yes, Narmer did do it, but Narmer was not one person. That was a group of people that were called the Noir Moors. Noir meaning black, and Moor meaning black. So really talking about black men. But phonetically, it would be spelled NMR. Just like sometimes you'll see in certain walls in Kemet, depending on what scholar you reading. You know what I mean?
That's an NTR.
Right, you'll see NTR. Or sometimes you might see a thing that looks like a K, and it'll be like KMR or TMR. That means the Moors. Like there's no wrong translation to that, unless you are systematically trying to hide who these people originally were. Because the thing with being a Moor is, what you're saying to a Caucasoid is, I'm your mother, your father, your God, your devil, your food, your earth, your sunlight, all in one. You dig? All at the same time. And because of that, there's nothing that you can tell me about myself. And see, people that weren't there in the beginning always want to act like they were. Because once you start stripping away all of the false names that they've given us, right? You start dealing with the real names. Then when you start stripping all the fake names that we gave them, you start to realize that they don't even have names. Like they're not even Caucasians. That's not even the word we could even call them, because the original Caucasians, if we were going to be historically accurate, were the people today we would call Hindus. Because if you're dealing with fact, allegorical fact, and you're dealing with systematic bringing things into existence, if the Caucasoid was grafted from us, right, his nose and stuff would be a lot thicker than it is now, right? If he was grafted from, let's say, Puerto Rican people or whatever, he would look a lot darker than he does now. If he was grafted from Mexican people, same thing. He would be shorter, he would be wider, he would be, you know, flatter. No, that's not who he came from. He was grafted from the original Hindus, who are the original Aryans, who are basically the Moors of the Hindu race. So really, he don't even have a name. He don't even have excuse me, I don't want to get into gender with him. It don't even have a name like that. It don't even have a time in which it could actively say, okay, I came on the planet here. He can only go by us for that, because we was the only ones here long enough to remember who the hell he was, how he got here. But we've been here so long, he done forgot. He done forgot totally, well, not all of them, but most of them have forgotten totally how they came into its existence. So you have a lot of them now doing speculatory knowledge as to how they got here. They'll talk about the missing link, or they'll talk about Sasquatch, or they'll talk about, you know, the caveman, or the troglodyte, or the Cro-Magnon, and all of these terms, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, all of these terms have nothing to do with reality. And his reality basically came about because we, at a time in our history, realized that the time was coming in which we had to fall to rise again. Because remember, nothing perfect can exist forever. So if it's perfect, 10 chances to 1 it's on its way out. So, at the time, we have basically 3 grand epochs in our history. We have what's called a stellar period. Then from a stellar period, we go into a lunar period. And from the lunar period, we go into a solar period. We're at the end of the solar period right now. So this is why everything is kind of up in the air, because nobody knows what's coming next. Well, those of us in the know, but, you know, the enemy is not going to build on that.
Talk to me about,
thank you.
Take some time out to talk to me about the Dogons. Who are they? Who are the Dogons?
Yeah.
Where did they come from?
Yeah. The Dogons are the keepers of the Syrian mysteries. They are the grand architects of stellar history, of intergalactic history. They are the keepers of our galactic history. Remember when the Moors bounced, they bounced up to a lot of them moved to the river Niger. And if you know, the Dogon is right there at the tip of the river Niger. When the cracker came, and when I say cracker, I'm not talking about saltines, I'm talking about Caucasian, I'm talking about the it, or the people today that we call Caucasoid people, who are only there to crack up our unity. That's why I used to call them crackers. They're there to just crack unity up and destroy it. Thank you, Queen. Thank you very much. Sure, if you have. Thank you. So, when the cracker came to allegedly his slave story, he found us on what? The river Niger, right? So that means the people that he was bagging up right there were not just some jungly Africans that were just out there. Thank you, Queen.
Right.
That was just out there willy-nilly, just not evolving, or just you know, swinging from trees or something. That wasn't the case. We're talking about ancestral scientists who had over 3 millennia worth of history under their belt and remembered it, to be able to recall it orally for people and to be able to disseminate it to the people. And then and what else was around the river Niger and the Dogon? We got Timbuktu, you know, one of the illest universities ever. Actually, it was an omniversity. It was just everything was there. You know what I mean? They was learning, kids was learning calculus at Timbuktu when they was like 2 years old. You know what I'm saying? And not this watered down, board of education mathematics. I'm talking about quantum physics. I'm talking about chaos theory. You know what I mean? Before there was even a Ingolstadt University in Bavaria. Before there was a Germany. So we're talking about a group of people who had this knowledge, and then for whatever reason fell victim. And then once they fell victim, they were then taken across the waters, allegedly, into what today now we call the United States corporation. You know, yet half of that story is right, but it's not correct. And when you're dealing with you're dealing with people that have a Janus perspective by nature. Now, what do I mean when I say Janus? Janus in Greek mythology is the double-headed god who looked both ways. In comic books, he's called the Living Tribunal. There's a character called the Living Tribunal in comic books, and he's used as that. And you always, anytime you say, when you hear somebody saying, "Oh, he two-faced it," that's a Janus principle. You on both sides of the fence, and trying to take from both, and not trying to give respect to either one. To deal with this principle, there's no way for them to accurately depict themselves as what they really are. They can only do it masonically through codes and allegory. They can't just come right out and say, "Hey, well, you know, we know you guys created us."
But there's a certain amount of people that can believe in that, or start to give homage to that, and those in a sense will become the inheritors of the true ancient wealth,
right,
in a sense. So, you know.
Right. You can't take over. You can't go into a great palace and say, "Oh, this palace is so beautiful and great, man. I love it," and then covet the people that built it. This is their thing. They are upset at us because we allowed them to come into this creation, and really, we only created them to get the worst part of us out of ourselves. And when we did that, we created a physical, what's called an egregore, or a golem, or a homunculus, or a vesture, or a host, or a puppet that would then be there to act out all of the aggressions that we don't want to have within us.
I want you to take this time right quick to really go in on the Egyptians. Take me to the museum where they got some of the information where our people can go and see images where they giving us the information. I seen the tape that you was doing where you even took me to the Moors, where they said it was the Moors.
Right.
That was in the booth was right there.
Right.
So that was hot right there. Where could the people go and find this information where you talking about?
Well, one, my queen and I did a tape called Decoding the Brooklyn Museum. Actually, it's a series of tapes. We did the Brooklyn Museum, the Native History Museum, the Whitney Museum, the MoMA Museum, and the Museum of Sex.
We did 7 of them.
And when you look at the tape, that's just for the tapes though, but you as a person, whether you see the tapes or not, you could go in there and just know that a lot of this stuff is basically there to almost act as a battery for a long dead civilization.
And
so
you know what I noticed? Excuse me, brother. You know what I noticed? Is that it does not even try to hide the information no more, because it feels that he already have done so much damage to the mind of our people that we don't even want to go out and do the research. And, you know, we would rather debate one another before we would go out and do the research. With the it's putting it right in our faces now.
But he's got to do that because
this is the time.
This is the time when it's coming in, when it's coming out, and also this is the time in which he is becoming face to face with his own mortality. All he's making out, since the time he's come on the planet, he's been talking about the end of the world. But it's the end of his world is what he's upset about. It has nothing to do with us. He could nuke this planet 10 million times, man. He'd still be here. In order for him to create the nuclear bomb, he had to study the physiology of the black man and black woman to harness the THS, which breaks down to hydrogen molecule, which breaks down to melanin molecule itself, to be able to extract that. Whenever he drops a nuclear bomb or a bomb like that, he's not doing that to kill people. That's just incidental. It's never what it seems with this dude. Remember I said he's dealing with a Janus principle. So that means whatever he does openly, the opposite effect is what he's trying to get. So when he drops a nuclear bomb on things, he's getting rid of people, but really what he's doing, he's accessing immortal information through the act of the explosion, because an explosion of that magnitude brings about what's called a mushroom cloud. A mushroom cloud comes when the pure resonance of the force of something rushes up to such a degree that it cannot go out. If you notice when a bomb drops, it goes up and then it goes like this. Why does it do that? It does that because the atmosphere, the so-called Van Allen belt, is not going to let anything go directly out. So what happens is the natural forces within the earth basically bring it back in so that way it can go back down to the earth, because everything perfect in nature spirals. So when we talk about information, what we're talking about, or we're talking about genetic information, we're talking about the real computer. The real computer is our DNA structure, is our blood, is our molecules, is our chromosome. That's the shit that is so prevalent in everything that somebody without it naturally now is on the outside of creation. So anyone with no melanin is basically on the outside of creation, not because Aseer the Duke of Tears is saying that, but because that's what it is, because everything in the world that has color in it has pigment, and pigment is melanin. So if you don't have that, and the sun gives life to everything with that except that which does not, then what happens? That means that either you got to convince me that what I have and what the world has is not good enough for me. That way I can inhibit my own melanin, calcify my own pineal gland, so that way I start thinking like a calcified Caucasoid, or I got to get you, I got to find some way to get it from you without you knowing the value of it. So in an economy that is resource orientated, right? Anytime you have a populace that is occupied by another populace, the first thing, one of the first things they do is start exporting the food that the people have been eating in this country for X amount of years. So when they came over and did what they did to the so-called Native Americans, which is us, but let's say, for instance, if we go by regular history, we say that these people today, we call them Indians, right? They basically was living off of buffalo hide and corn. So what do? They kill off all the buffaloes, right? And they take control of the corn and start making them eat potatoes, which is what the Irish people was eating. See what I'm saying? Then they took them off the corn and started making them eat chicken and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? Then they took them off the mead, which is honey wine, and got them to drink firewater, which is like straight bourbon and vodka and all this stuff, right? Because what you're doing is you're changing the physiology of the people that you're occupying now. Because once you control them, it's not enough for you to control their mind. You got to control their sustenance. You got to control what they put in their mouth, what they put in their ear, what they put in their eye, all at the same time, without them realizing that you're doing that. So you got to get rid of those people that remember how this got this way in the first place. So again, what we do, we see the future before it happened. We let it happen. No, we see the future before it happened. We write it down. We let it happen. We send somebody back who remembers how it got that way. Then we allow the judgment to come through. So we're now towards the last stages of it. We're at the point where people like us are letting people know what happened, and now the judgment's about to come through. So the origin of something is how this thing will exist. So the origin, the beginnings, the genesis of it came about when we, as original people, during a period we would call, let's say, the lunar period, the time when black women like this and like that is running the universe at this time. And my aunt is running the universe, basically. But we'll say the world.
Races are two different.
Well, they're
the same?
They're sister spirits, right? They're sisters born of the same father with different purposes.
Okay.
But they can be interchangeable. Sometimes you'll see images like this. This is straight ma'at, but when you see like this with a feather on top, that would what we would consider ma'at proper, right? This would basically just be ma'at, But sometimes you see an image like this, and it'll be a woman. It looks like she's got like a block stare on her head. You know what I mean? That's another aspect of that, But when these black women were running the planet, right, during what we call the lunar period, we're telling time by the moon or by the feminine principle. War, as we know it, did not exist as it exists now. So, if I had beef with you, I couldn't just go and fight you. I would have to go to my queen, and then your queen would go to your queen, and then we would talk, and then they would talk. Then they would settle it by saying, okay, if I got a son, my son go live with you, and then your daughter come live with me. And then when they get to be 13 or 18, they can go back to their own thing. And if we still couldn't work it out, then she would lead the army against me and vice versa. Or they would both marry, and then we would join the house back together. This is why you would say the first 47 dynasties of Kemet were incestuous, because they were all basically brother and sister. Not necessarily genetic brother and sister, but I'm not saying they wasn't that either. I'm saying that at the time that the first dynasties were beginning to burgeon over there, right? They came about through a sense of interbreeding, you know what I mean? Or intermediary breeding, in which, second and third cousins might marry, to keep the whole thing. But then after, let's say, the 47th dynasty, thing begins to get spanned, because now we're expansive now, in that part of the world. But I'm of the opinion that Kemet, as we understand it, if the whole world was basically in one continent and all of the seas were basically on the outside, and the rivers basically were on the inside of the continent, then that means that all of these societies technically can evolve at the same time.
I would say to change it, change the conversation a little bit.
Please.
The Bible, because now we want to take you into what they call religion now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say the Bible is one of the most powerful weapons that it has used against us today.
Yes.
It has gave us this Bible, and it's so hard to break the chains off of that right now.
Yes.
You can tell our people that all this come out of ancient Kemet. You can go to the walls.
Yeah, but if the Bible don't say that, it's a wrap.
You can tell the Muslims that, the Quran, they get this right here, and the Kaaba really represents the spirit, the soul. They still wouldn't understand
that religion in heaven.
Even when we go, like I think I told Rashid, the Kaaba. The Kabbalah. The Kabbalah
is the Kaaba. Right. And the Ba.
The soul.
That's right.
The spirit. Is it the spirit?
You're right. The Ka is the
Ba is the spirit. Hold up.
Yeah. The Ka is the spirit, the Ba is the body.
There you go.
You're right.
There you go, brother.
But to bring it into the religion aspect of it, the Bible started coming into existence when we as Moors now, as people being called that in the world, in pseudo-modern times being called this now, let's say between 1492, let's say between 711 AD and about 1559, let's say, right? Spain was important to us because that was like our Washington, and that's where those Moors on this side of the world could meet there, just as Moors from the other side of the world could meet there, and we all commune there and we build right there. When Spain fell, that just totally dejected everything, right? Or when Andalus fell, the last stronghold being Granada, when that fell, that basically broke up our communication, because now we couldn't really build with each other the way we needed to, because now we're all basically forcing ourselves to fight against our light-skinned children, who are now called, today we would call them Puerto Ricans. At the time, they was called Spaniards. The people that today are called Spaniards were actually the slaves of the people today we would call Puerto Rican, because the people that are Italian today are not the ones that we gave up Spain to. We lost Spain to our light-skinned Spanish-speaking children. You know what I'm saying? Because we stopped breeding with us and us alone. You know what I'm saying? Because remember, at the time, we're dominant. So I know my history, so I know that I could lay down with any woman on this planet and give her a Moorish baby, no matter what color she is. So based on that, I'm supreme, So that means I could have babies with anybody. But the thing is, that's physiology, but your mind state is what dictates what type of seed you really want to wish in.
Right.
So you could be the darkest Ungawa Black Power dude, but if secretly you really want to be white, you will have a baby that will come out a lot lighter than you.
Right. So how was we stripped of our power? If we was running, and I know we was running, and these are the questions that I have all the time.
Good.
When I'm out there in the street speaking. So I'm asking you, we was all of this. We ran the universe for millions of years. How was we stripped of our power?
Well, it boils down
by little people,
because we didn't lose it to him. We lost it to ourselves. Remember, I was saying we lost it to our light-skinned children. Then our light-skinned children wilded out, and then lost it to their slaves. You see what I'm saying? See, at the time, same with the Bible. One of the first English translations of the Bible was done by this dude named Wycliffe Tyndale. And he's the one who translated from the Pope Vulgate Latin. Now, Vulgate Latin, papal Vulgate Latin, just means that the Latin that the Pope and the Catholics are speaking is vulgar. It's not accurate. You know what I'm saying? So, when he translated it into English, right? English, English, is different than Yinglish, which is with a Y. N-G-H, right? Two different things. Just like white, W-H-I-T-E, is different than white, W-I-G-H-T. See what I'm saying? If we're dealing with historically accurate things as we're talking about. We're talking about the time in which the people needed to read. Remember, Caucasian people could not read at this point. They were just masses of illiterate people who were, for the better part, slaves. You know what I mean? And because they were enslaved, they had a slave mentality, much the same way we do now. Only difference, their slave mentality was based on the fact that they were living under people who lived in opulence all the time. See what I'm saying? And who knew constantly how they got here. See what I'm saying? If we knew consciously how the Caucasoid got here right now, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now. Because he wouldn't be able to flip it on us because we wouldn't believe him. Right. So what he had to do, is he had to create a history for himself. So one of the first ways this happened for him again. Remember I was saying how we created a council for him to be recognized as human. Right. The first council of Nicaea in Rome. This is way back at 333 AD. So Rome fell, let's say 800 AD, right? So by the time Rome fell, it got burned down by the same people they were trying to give a religion to, these wild Germanian people. You can see this in the beginning of Gladiator, the movie with Russell Crowe. You'll find him fighting a whole host of crazy German people. Now these German people then got reindoctrinated and absorbed back into the culture, right? And they readapted themselves, started calling themselves Visigoths, or also Ostrogoths, right? So they basically just destroyed all of Europe, basically. So the Moors, who had strongholds throughout Europe and Africa and Asia and all Americas and stuff, realized that now is a time where we could go back in there and take this thing back again, because we had constantly been taking Europe back. We did it from the time of Hannibal, from before Hannibal with the Phoenicians, before the Phoenicians with the Minoans, before the Minoans with the Etruscans. We always taking that place over because we ain't never really left like that.
I'm glad you mentioned Hannibal. Mm-hmm. Hannibal, where did he go to fight the Europeans?
Into Spain.
How did he take them elephants from Africa to Spain? And how long did they live there? And what was they eating? Being that they eat the green. And Spain is nothing but all white.
Right.
He was all white.
Right.
But I have pictures.
So that's the problem I'm thinking about. How did Hannibal
He was a genius because he understood Rome adopted everything Rome got. Everything Rome got, it got from Carthage. But Carthage didn't fall to Rome. Carthage fell to Numidia. Hannibal, the beef was this. Numidia.
And what's that?
Numidia is what now today we would call West Africa, or what we would call like Morocco, Tunis, Tripoli, all of that. All of that was Numidia at the time, right? What really happened, when those scholars that really know, you read, you find out what happened, right? Hannibal basically had three brothers. It was Hannibal, Hasdrubal, and his father was Hamilcar, right? That was his father. He had a brother named Hasdrubal, and he had another brother named Mago, right? Hannibal was the middle kid, right? Hannibal, he took an oath with his father in front of idol, but it wasn't an idol the way that we would see idols today. It was much like this. It was basically an idol to the goddess of the harvest. So really, it was an idol to Isis, or we would say, really, you could say it was like him. This is like Ptah. This could be seen as Ptah too, but this is a myriad of different deities. This would represent Isis. This would represent Buddha. This could represent Lower Egypt. This could represent so forth and so on. But he was basically worshiping an idol. They had an idol like this, and Hannibal and his father took an oath in front of this idol that Hannibal would never lay down with Rome, ever. Because Rome had just come into prominence by eating up the Macedonian states and the old Grecian states. So Hannibal, from the time he was like 11, a shorty, was on campaigns with his father, invading, grabbing up slaves, all of this stuff, right? Now, the neighboring kingdom was Numidia. And Numidia was ruled at the time by this dude named Massinissa. And Massinissa was a black man, just as Hannibal was and all the Numidians were. The Numidian people came out of another people called the Garamantes, or the Garamants, right? You can get a book called Golden Trade of the Moors by this dude named Walter Beauville, and he talks about it. He talks about them. The Garamants basically became the Numidians, and they basically were like a mercenary army that Rome would hire sometimes to put other people in check. You know what I'm saying? So there was a kind of unfriendly rivalry between the Numidians and the Carthaginians, because they both came out of a people called the Phoenicians. See what I'm saying? And the Phoenicians were the people who basically set up the old Moorish trade empire throughout the world, because the Phoenicians created this dye called Murex or Morex. That was the purple dye that you'll find in all kingly, that royal purple, that royal magenta deep purple. So Massinissa and Hannibal were uneasy allies. So what happened was Scipio Africanus basically was sent by Rome to go in and do something about it. So he went to Massinissa, the leader of the Numidian people, and said, look, I want you to help me against Carthage. Well, Massinissa was like, I don't really like the Carthaginians, how they get down like that, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want to hook up with you because I know how grimy y'all are, talking about the Romans. So Massinissa said, well, I'm going to see what Hannibal thinks. So Massinissa fell in love with Hannibal's niece. Wow, that's beautiful. That's what's up. Yeah. Massinissa was in love with Hannibal's brother's niece. Her niece was named Sophansiba. Sophansiba was a beautiful woman who really was in love with Massinissa. So the idea, remember I say how we would get together where, okay, I'll marry my daughter to you and vice versa. Hannibal, though, he was kind of arrogant. And when his brother died, his brother Hasdrubal, Sophansiba's father, got killed on one of the campaigns against getting killed by one of the Numidian people. See what I'm saying? So Massinissa...
Hold up. Excuse me for 1 minute. I want to cut this short on Hannibal.
Yeah.
Because I would love to do... There's nothing out there on Hannibal.
Straight Hannibal.
Oh, a straight Hannibal? Oh, we'll go in.
Part 2 on Hannibal.
We'll go in. We'll go in on him.
The history of Hannibal.
Because this shit about him, people don't even know.
That is awesome. Right. There's nothing out there. I got something on Nat Turner. My brother did a nice 5-hour piece on Nat Turner live in front of the people. But I think that right there, we need to go in on that.
We can go in because that's where we get into war and shit. But so, to wrap it up real quick, the beef basically came because Massinissa, who wanted to marry Sophansiba on behalf, got cock-blocked by Hannibal. And then based on that, Massinissa then hooked up with Scipio Africanus. And then Scipio Africanus used Massinissa basically to get in and then destroy Hannibal. So I say all this to say that we never fall to Caucasian people. We fall to our own people, and then he comes up in the meantime. He never created the United States of America. He never created anything of his own volition. Everything that he gets, he's got when we put it down or when we lose sight of why we created it in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was never considered a white man like that. Because when you read the history on it, I got something on that here. When you read the history on that, the legal statutes on that, the wording of it means that all he really did was just hook up his skin color with the already existing caste system that we set up to keep him out. So again, it's never an instance in which he rises or subdues us. It's always an instance in which we allow him the platform to act as if he is that. So, case in point, if I got beef with you and you got beef with me, we don't fight each other. I get my slaves, you get your slaves, they fight, and then this fight in history now becomes known as the Battle of Gettysburg. See what I'm saying? Those Union officials, those Union Caucasian dudes were slaves, the same way the Southern white dudes were slaves. It's just that they had uniforms and stuff, and they had a president of the Confederacy, and because this dude says that this is what happened, is what happened. It's not real. It's always about what it is we choose to invest our energy into, and we as original people have to stop investing energy in false histories, false dialectics, false perceptions of ourselves that don't exist. You know what I'm saying? I've built with people from the Smithsonian Institute, from them, and asked them why they found all of those Egyptian artifacts or ancient Kemetian or Moorish artifacts in the Grand Canyon, and why they dumped them into the Atlantic Ocean. Why did they do that?
And once you said that, they realized that you had knowledge about that taking place, and then in a sense they had to reveal what went down. But if he didn't know that, they wouldn't have exposed any of that to you. They wouldn't have said, wow, okay, you know about X, Y, and Z, well, where'd you get this information from? Rather than figuring out where it was, you know, gotten from. It's just like, okay, this person's checking me in my game this far. So really, they'll reveal as long as you know what to ask and how to get it from them.
That's right.
But they won't reveal anything if you don't know that it's you and your people, in a sense, that have created, discovered, and ran
everything.
Just looking through this book, so many of the archaeologists are Caucasian men that have the time and the money and the fortitude to go into, you know, certain parts of the world and dig. Then, I mean, if you're digging, you can pretty much stake claim on whatever it is you find. And say, okay, this rock, I'm going to call this rock the third rock from the sun. And this third rock from the sun, and then if you get a group of people that say, that's the third rock from the sun, that becomes the third rock of the sun, and then it's whoever that knew the real history of the third rock from the sun to say, no, you called it the third rock from the sun because I gave you permission to call it that because my people, then it's like, oh, damn. It's like calling a card shark out on his game, and then it's like,
also,
don't blow me up totally to people that don't know how I'm not.
Also, you know what it is too, man? Where we went wrong as people, we started creating too many races to serve us, man. That's what happened too. We got too involved in creating races to serve us based on the climate and the environment that we lived in at the time. You know what I mean? Like even when you look at this, like as we look at the Sphinx, we know it's an original man. But before it was an original man, right? This whole head, this was carved later. Originally, it was a lion's head, because at the time that this went through, this at the time that they carved it up or built it up for the time, it was actually facing the constellation of Leo in the star system, and Leo was right there by the Nile. And was adjacent to the Milky Way, the same way the Nile positioning was. So everything so above was so below. We basically mapped out everything to look the same way it did in the stars, because ritualistically that means that it would be easier for us to transcend between both.
You ever heard of the 21-gun salute?
Yes, sir.
And where did that come about?
Well, historically, they say that came from Napoleon trying to shoot the nose off the Sphinx.
That's right.
That's what they say.
They took 21 shots. That's what they say.
Right. But I was doing the knowledge to it, and there's a book written by this dude named Churchward. I forget the name of the book, but if you look at a lot of his books, this dude named Churchward. And basically what it happened too was, another version of that account was that Napoleon actually had nothing to do with that.
That's right.
That this was actually blown off by a Moor, by a black man. The question was why. The why was because at the time, as the story goes, the Sphinx was buried up to the neck.
Right, I remember that.
It was buried up to the neck, and people, right, were going to it and worshiping it as if it was God at the time. Now, this is at the time that the Moors were splitting the religion of Islam from the science of I self-law and master and giving it to the people we today now call Arabs or Arabs.
Right.
Because the Arabs at this time were a nomadic people, another race that was created out of Moors from Abyssinia. You say Coptic, Egyptian, dark black people, and their light-skinned subjects in an empire called Byzantium. When they would mix and copulate with each other, they produced another strain, and this strain became known as the Yemenis or the Yemenites, and then the Yemenites eventually went further up into what they now call Arabia. At the time it was called Havilah, and then they created what we now today call the Arabian race. But Arabs are not a race. They're an admixture or another version of us. This went down. It was buried up to the neck, and the black people were worshiping this thing. So the Moor, I got his name written down somewhere, I can't remember it right now, but the Moor went and basically, this is where the term "cut your nose off to spite your face."
Right.
This is where this comes from.
Right. He tried to destroy it to get the people
out of the religion thing that we were given to the slaves.
Right.
See what I'm saying? So now Napoleon. This is not to say that Napoleon didn't contribute to that.
Right.
However, in my research, Napoleon is not even a Caucasoid person as we understand him. He basically is a Moor because he was born in a place called Corsica, and Corsica was ruled by the Moors up until the late 1600s. He was born in like 17 something, so he had all that in him. That's why whenever you see Napoleon, he's always got the red on. Because when the war went down between us as a family, it went down between two color extremes. You would say the red and the blue, and it's the same to this day. When you had the Union and the Confederacy, it was the red and the blue, or the red and the gray. The same thing with the Crips and the Bloods, the red and the blue. Just like today in Republican Democrats, you got the red states and the blue states. Because that also represents the two extremes of blood types you have in your body. You have the DNA structure, which is the red, which means you have a higher iron content in your blood. And then you have the blue, which represents the RNA, which is a higher copper content in your blood. This is where you get the term blue blood. So really, what's happening is it's two extremes of the same family bloodline going at it with each other. Now, again, when we deal with history, we got to take into account that most people are getting their history from people that were not there to record it. So it's always going to be up for conjecture. It's always going to be up for debate. There's always going to be somebody saying that the Kemites was not black. There's always going to be people saying the Moors wasn't black. There's always going to be people saying that black people have no history other than slavery. But that has to exist in order to create the negativity for us to rise above to become perfect. Because this is what I'm talking about. We had to create that doubt. We had to create that imperfection in order for us to coexist with it, to rise above it. That's the difference between us as Moors and us as let's say Muslim people. Muslim people only specifically like being around Muslims, just like Christians only like being around Christians. But when you are Moor, you know that you created all of that. So I could lay down and talk to, if I'm talking to a Christian, I'm gonna talk to him like this. If I'm talking to a Muslim, I'm gonna talk to him like this, because I know that my forefathers created all of that for y'all to deal with. It's not for me to deal with like that, because I know the difference between religion and relying on something. Most people don't know the difference between that because they've been taught to
a real palpable age when they were emotionally needing to feel something. Because really all religions deal in all emotions. They deal with your emotional body.
Yeah.
It's an empathic way of addressing where you are in the cosmogony of it. So,
because man is the fool for the divinity he worships. Whatever you worship, that thing that you're worshiping is feeding on you. No matter how sublime, no matter how great your intent is, you are what you create in your life. You know, there's a lot of us that have problems with bringing money and things like that into our existence. You know, something that we're all struggling with, because the people who are running the government in the country and the world right now are the ones who inherited our empire when it fell. So of course they're going to have the money now. You know what I'm saying? Then when we started building the money back up by about the time of Black Wall Street, you see what happened with that. Then when we even had our own, let's say, black mafia, you know what I mean? Like, one of the real reasons why black people get preyed upon so much by the police is because we don't pay them off. We're the only ones in the United States or in the world that do not pay the cops off, dude. And that's for a reason. You know what I'm saying? Because we know systematically that we really created this thing. We're not going to work a job that's paying $2.50 an hour when we know that we put up the money for this whole world to function. But that's why the first had to be put to the bottom, Because again, when you could look at Venus and go, you don't need a book. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to remember how to get there. You don't need an ancestor or an elder or somebody like that to put you on to the thing. You already there. You it. So we're getting to a time where we're about to be that again. But the problem is we are so caught up in tribalism and bullshit debates that have nothing to do with getting us past it. That's why we feel like we're stuck here. Because we are contributing and putting energy into something we know does not exist. We know that there's nothing behind money, dollar bills and things like that. Yet I know if I don't have it, I know that it's not going to allow me to get what I want. So really it's not the money that I want. It's the access that it's going to give me.
It's the exchange.
Yes, sir. It's that.
It's to exchange something.
But before it was that, it was gold.
Right.
Silver, but who's gonna walk around with gold bars and stuff or anything? But I tell you this: if we'd have walked around with gold bullion on our back, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now.
But that's the way we did it at one time.
That's how we was doing it.
And matter of fact, that book there, that's what that's dealing with.
Yeah.
All the gold and stuff that we had.
Because really, we wasn't rocking gold like that just to look fly and all that. We was rocking it so that way, let's say we was ever caught out in the desert or ever caught out in wilderness, we could melt it down and drink it and then not need to eat.
Wow, man.
We was doing stuff where we could drink, we could melt the silver down and mix it with a touch of the gold and ingest it and then literally activate our hypothalamus, pineal gland and pituitary gland all at the same time.
But wouldn't the chemicals kill you?
No. Because melanin is gold. You know what I'm saying? Melanin is what they call black gold. It's not oil.
But I know you ain't talking about this shit they got today. In these little Arab stores, that ain't the...
Nah.
That's not the...
Nah, that's that slum shit.
Mixed up with
yeah, that's that slum shit. But I'm talking about we right now is to go to... we don't even have to go to Africa. We could go right to Montauk Point. We could go right to the Serpent Mound in Georgia. We could go right to parts of Arizona right now and mine gold and get it. Utah right now, mine pure gold and get it. But the problem with that is, if we were living in a real society based on real law, that means that if I wanted to buy a car, I could bring in gold that weighs the same amount as that car, drop it down, and that's really my car. If I was to walk into a spot right now with gold like that and drop it down, they call the cops. Mm-hmm. You dig? Because this system has dummied the people down to such a degree that the people are literally functionally retarded, you know, and it's getting worse. And the main people, unfortunately, that are supporting that are black women. Black women are supporting their children being dummied down to the point of inebriation, to the point where where 3 out of every 10 child is obese. That's not the, if the father's there, if the father's not there, that's one thing, right? But if the kid is with you every day, all day, doing what it needs to be done, and you there with that kid, and you're responsible for that child's diet, and this child is going to be like 150, 350, 250 pounds at 13 years old, something's wrong with you. Because these women are creating slaves for their God, who is the Caucasian man, right, in this epoch right now, to feed off of. So the new thing now is to get all these black women to give up not only their womb, but their souls to this society. And what is a black woman's soul other than her child? So she'll literally give that up and continuously deject the father, right, in order to get fake accoutrements from a already decaying, dead society. Why would she do that? Because she is starting to realize that she is the one who allowed him to exist in this reality in the first place, genetically. Because it was during the time that Yaqub grafted this thing, she she was the one in control. So yeah, Yaqub had his idea about what he was going to do or whatever, but it was still a matriarchal society. So he had to get permission from an original woman to do so. And then once she did that, she had to allow herself to be open enough to give birth to an aspect of him that we today would, let's say, like a monkey. You know what I mean? And in that, she then had to perpetually give birth to it and create a world almost for it to exist in. All why? Because we wanted to prove to ourselves that we could overcome the worst part of our natures in one thing. So she didn't do it because she hated the black man or herself. She did it at the time that she initiated the experiment. She did it based on pure science. There's no right, no wrong in that. She's a scientist. She's God, so she's going to do what she wanted to do. But the problem is, when it got to the time of, let's say, the Willie Lynch era, you know what I'm saying? She had been so far in and so far away from this part of herself, or this part of herself, that she had no remembrance of how he got there. So that way she couldn't even remember the spell to get him back in the bottle. So to prove this, you look at the end of the Matrix movie, you'll see in Matrix 3, it comes down to what? A black woman and a Caucasian man. The oracle and the architect. Right? And she is the one that allows him to exist. So he knows that if he can get her to love him, or at least, because she don't really love him, even when she with him and have his baby, she don't even really love him like that. But she will, she like him being into her, and she like the fact that she could use him to put us in check, because we don't have to conform to this thing.
Talk to me about this shrewd so-called Jew. What is the tricks that he's still coming up with today to keep our people fooled? What are some of the symbology images that he's putting forth to our babies to keep them confused? One of the things is, I want to show you this.
Please.
That's the back of it. Show the back of his face. See, when we allow them to teach our children, you know, we don't add on to that. This is a white Jew right here. Look at his name. What his name says on the
male. But male means black. Male's another word for more.
Right. Now, what I want you to do, brother Aseer, that's the name of the book.
Where did that come from?
Now, go in the book and just go through a few pages. Imagine if your 3-year-old baby is looking at that book, like my babies in there, they ain't even see that. They'll be like, yeah. Just go to a part where I want you to see what they showing. And I know you ain't got time to read it. No. Not even that.
But wait. But I want to show this.
Right.
But this is what I mean about Janus and dualism. He's talking about where did I come from? A guide for children and parents, right? He's not saying black children.
Right.
And he's not saying black parents.
If you turn it up, but if you look up there,
the African American edition, which means that there's one for Caucasian people, there's one for Mexican people, all of that. That's cool. Let them feel like they ain't part of the human family.
Look at what it is.
But peep this. He's basically showing in this image now that sperm is black, right?
Yes.
He's saying that the thing that brings things into existence is black, right? The sperm itself, right?
He's got on a black top hat.
And he's got on a black top hat, which is basically another allegory of the fez, right? And he's got the heart. This heart is symbolic esoterically for the Valentinian Gnostics. Reverend Phil Valentine talks about them, and he says he's no pun intended. He talks about the Valentinian Gnostics. And basically, whenever you see a heart like this, you're seeing that. But what you're also seeing is a vagina. You know what I'm saying? A vulva. You're also seeing the buttocks of a woman. But again, when you got the top hat on it, and you got the rose.
And the bow tie.
And the bow tie. So what you got here is 3 versions of Moorish culture. You got the top hat, which represents the fez. You got the red rose that represents the Rosicrucian order, of which Pascal Beverly Randolph, the Moor, was the greatest in the world, started that. Also Francis Bacon, another Moor, started that. And then you got the top, and then you got the bow tie, again, which represents nowadays the Nation of Islam. And it's black, okay? So you have to know one thing about so-called Yehudas or Jews as a people.
Wow.
They do not always.
Yeah. Now,
It's
why
deep.
would he think he need to put images in the baby book like that, showing
Of the naked,
of the naked black men?
of the naked sister, but notice that they're more rotund. They're
Yeah.
more
But
rotund
you know
looking.
what? If you read it,
Mm-hmm.
that's the sign.
That's when you gonna win.
Into pussy,
Yeah.
dick.
Yeah.
He's saying
Of
them
course, 'cause
words.
Yeah.
He's going to teach your children about what it is you're scared
Right.
or have been.
That, but also he's doing it from a so-called Ebonics,
Let me see.
a so-called Ebonics point of view, in which that we as black people only speak English and slang. So he's basically perpetuating that idea, and he can do that. You know why? Because we're
I
in
want you to
this.
show that picture, and then the next page.
Boom. We got the man and the
This is
woman
a
in the
children's
tub.
book. This is a children's book, y'all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the rubber ducky.
The
See
rubber
that
ducky in the middle.
homosexual shit? I mean,
Yeah.
that freaky shit?
Yeah. Yeah. In the duck.
And it's the children. It looks like it was a bathtub for a child.
Right. And look how obese
Yes.
the black man and black woman are.
And I'm trying to see what it says. All right, you see that?
Yeah. But let's take out even for what it say, because anything he say is going to be conjecture.
Right.
When you're dealing with the Jew though,
But check
right?
flip the role of the man and the woman. The man is on the feminine energy side, and the woman is on
Right.
the
That's just what I was going to say. In the Kabbalist tree of life, the man is supposed to be over here and the woman's supposed to be over here. Now he, as a Jew, he knows that. You understand? But he specifically is flipping up our perception of ourselves because we allow other people to tell us our history.
Yeah, it is.
This has nothing to do with even racism anymore. This is basically just about keeping the status quo.
Right.
So books like this are good though in one instance, because what it does is it shows you how free they are to talk about sexuality. Our people are totally repressed with this shit. That's one of our problems too. We do not take control of the sexual magic and the sexual energy that we have as people. And because we don't, the people that feed off of us are going to do that. Specifically the so-called Jewish people, you know.
That's how much time you got in right here. You got an hour and 28 minutes in.
Wow.
So
we'll
I'm
go.
gonna wrap it up.
We'll do 10, 15 minutes more
Okay.
to make it an even
The hour 30,
40.
like a movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we're dealing with the so-called Jewish people, what we're dealing with is a group of Caucasian people that were allowed to come out of the caves quicker than those that were more Germanic type, more like avaricious type, and we allowed them to take an aspect of our science called Hebrew, and then or Hebrew, and then convert an aspect of that, and that became Judaism, and then that became a man-made thing we gave them. We, as Moors, converted the entire people that they are calling European Jews to Judaism in 800 AD. The king's name was King Joseph, but they didn't use the word king for their kings at the time. They called them Kagans.
Okay.
Kagan Joseph was a Jewish dude who, at the time, his people lived at the foot of the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia, Russia. And they occupied a pass that led to the kingdom that is defunct now, called Byzantium, that got taken over by the Turks, and now it's called Istanbul. Kagan Joseph was looking for a religion to give his people because they had none. So at the time, the Moors had already been in Spain for close to maybe 600 years up until this time. So when he realized the power of that, he sent for the main three people representative of the main three religions. One dude was a Hebrew, Moor from Granada. One dude was a Coptic Christian from what today we would call Abyssinia, and then another dude was a so-called Muslim, Arab type Muslim from what today we call Syria. But the Syrians, they was just falling out of rule by a Moorish dynasty called the Sassanid that ruled in what's now today called Iran. He gets all three dudes there, Well, no. The Christian dude found out that the Muslim dude was coming and had the Muslim dude killed before he could get there. Right? So it took them mad long to get there. So finally it comes down to a Christian guy, Coptic Christian dude, and a Moorish Hebrew dude from Spain. So he asked the Kagan, the Jew, who became Jew, asked him, he said, well, what's your religion about? So he tells him what his religion is about. All of this about Christ and God and all this other stuff. So he finally looks to the Moor from Spain and says, well, what's your religion about? Who's the Hebrew? He said, well, do you know about this dude's religion? He said, well, yeah, I don't really know nothing about his religion, but if you ask him where his religion came from, he would say it came out of mine. So the Kagan looked at the dude and said, is that true? He said, yeah. He said, okay, well, I'm rolling with you. So from that point on, the Moors became responsible for the so-called Jews, and that's how the Jews got to be around us in Spain and Andalusia, and they became known as Jews. But they were different than Sephardim or Ashkenazim or Falashim.
It's Spanish, it's Cordoba, but doing the research through my ancestors, we created Judaism
for them.
Totally for them, and understanding the history in Spain and the fact that my people, in a sense, come from Cordoba, but we look like this.
Yeah.
So in dealing with, typically Spanish-looking people, they get very angry when they know that Spanish people can also look like this. Like, they looked like me before they became the Latinized version of, the Jennifer Lopez's or whatever.
Right.
But when you go to Spain, and I'm in Cordoba, the people there know that I know who I am, and then they have to, and they give homage, and then they're like, oh, you're from, damn, your last name is Cordoba.
Her great-great-great-grandfather,
I can't really...
Her ancestor was the one who laid the cornerstone in the Alhambra, yes. Prince Al-Hakam I of Cordoba. Yes. So when they see her, Moors in Spain, and we traced it back. So with that, she now, as a Moor in this age, phenotypically now, or statistically now, should be able to go back to Spain, show her name or whatever, and get the deed to the city, because these people know that they violated all of the tenets of the treaty in which we allowed them to run it. Because we never, Isabella and Ferdinand and all of them, they were Moors. They were light-skinned Moorish people who converted to Catholicism for political power. Right. This has nothing to do with, so when we left Spain, or allegedly kicked out or expelled, right, really what was happening is we were saying, okay, you're going to be able to run this now for 800 years, and hopefully you'll do a good job. Mercenaries under them that made them have to deal with stuff, and made them have to then, once they kicked the dark-skinned Moors out and the light-skinned Moors was in, the people today we would call Puerto Ricans or Hispanics, then they got pushed out by their so-called Italian, so-called slaves or whatever, and it pushed them in.
I want to show you something right quick. When you look at that right there.
Exactly.
Does that offend you, man, if you were to see that picture?
No.
Oh, absolutely not. It gives me great pleasure.
Because I tell you this, I have friends.
Put it in the way where,
I have friends. I have friends that look like him. Well, I have people that, because we do music and stuff too. So I have a lot of Jewish fans and people that's on it like that too. I think so. And yeah. We do music and stuff like that too. So I have a lot of friends that are like that. Matter of fact, we just went to a wedding at the Lubavitch World Headquarters on Kingston Avenue. The only Moors up in there.
Wow.
And I went moored out with the fez on, the feathers. She had the whole thing on.
I totally went with my erased crown.
We ritualized them crazy.
And we were the only people of color in it might have been about a good 500-600
besides the waiters and stuff.
Right.
but we the honorees. But I say that to say that these people that we call, first of all, I don't advocate hate for nobody, because hate is a stagnant emotion based on fear. I don't hate nobody. I don't give a damn what they've done, so long as they ain't do nothing to me personally. So let's get that out the way. But what I will say is that the people today that we are calling Jews are actually not. What they are actually practicing, especially in Brooklyn, because I grew up in Crown Heights, okay? So I'm the first one in my family, to basically grow up in Brooklyn during the so-called hip-hop era, you know what I mean? And my family left Louisiana back in the days because they was on some native Moorish steez, and the people down there was trying to be on some straight Christian stuff, and then they just had to be out. So I'm really the first one in my family to get back to how my family was until now. So I say this. I say that to say this, that the people that are Jews today, especially the Hasidim and all of that, Hasidim means pious ones. And the Hasidim come out of a group of Kabbalists and Talmudian Torah type Jews who are actually worshiping Heru. They actually worship Heru. They don't even really worship Yahweh and the way that they talking about. That's the difference between them and the Jews over in Israel. The Jews in Israel don't like the ones over here in America, because the Jews in Israel worship Yahweh, and all you got to do is get one of Brother Rashid's tapes to find out who Yahweh is. But he's basically an egregorial spirit from the time of creation that's just here to just destroy the body and get blood sacrifice. Whereas these ones, the Jews that you be seeing with the side locks, that's basically them trying to be this.
Right, they wear all black.
When you see them in all black, and you see them walking around the hood, and you see them doing their little rituals, bobbing their head back and forth, the same way you see Muslims in front of the Kaaba stone doing this. Sometimes they wear little black boxes on their heads, like the black box you get in the airplane when the airplane crashed. That's symbolic of the Kaaba stone, and the Kaaba stone symbolic of the black woman. So again, they worshiping that. But when you see them with the side lock like that, right, what it is you see them on doing, whenever you see in KEMET, when you see images of the young princes, you see some of the princes with side locks in the side of their hair, because they worship in Heru. When you look at the term Israel, Israel breaks down to Isis, Ra, and El. That's Isis, Ra, and Elohim, which is Osiris, which is the black man. So again, when they set up Israel, they were setting it up based on the so-called Zionist perspective. But the original Zionist was us. We was the ones. We was the ones doing all of this. We was the ones creating situations in which these people had to find a way to exist and find a way and a place to be. Yeah, 2 more minutes. A place for them to exist at. Because in the end, these people don't have history the way that we have it. Because there was a time in history where they did not occupy what it is we call history. That's not, again, me trying to cut people out of the human family. That's me being real. The same way they talk about how nobody existed when the dinosaurs existed. Come on, man. Come on, man. All you gotta do is watch the Flintstones and see Fred was existing at the same time, and they domesticating these animals. Who taught them how to do all of that? That's us. That's us. It's always us. And the problem is, the more we do us, the more they can't do them. The more we focus on what we have to do, the more we don't pay attention to them. And if we stop paying attention to them, they will cease to exist. And the thing is, we as people think that that's a joke. It is not a joke. We allow them to exist here by giving them mental energy. One of the illest, any viewer that's watching this, whether it be now, 150 years from now, 2,000 years from now, if there's people that are occupying white supremacist mind state in your time that you live in, or ignore them and see what happens. Because once you ignore them, you take the mental energy, the lifeline, away from them. Once the lifeline is gone, then that means that they cease to exist. Whether or not they're physically in front of you is immaterial. Because I could be around pigs and all that with bullet belts and all this shit on. They're not bothering me because they don't exist to me. Because I don't give them any energy.
You delete them from your reality.
From my reality. And when I do see them, if I am thinking about them, I always think about them in a subservient position, because that's what they're here to do. These people we got a tape that we just finished called Black Nazis, man. And it's all about this type of thing. And it's all about black people feeding this society white supremacy. It's not about hating black people. It never was about that. All of those images of slavery, and again, I'm not saying that a lot of that didn't happen. I'm saying that the way that it is presented to you is presented to you in a sleight of hand way, and it's not accurate. You cannot create a ship for slavery because you cannot enslave a ship. Therefore, a slave ship cannot exist in the traditional sense because you cannot build a ship for slavery. Because if they were going to do that, they'd have put bathrooms or something in them. Because you cannot take millions of people, son. Imagine if they went and if you took 5 million people. I've had scholars, astronomical numbers, 100 million people. Imagine if you took 100 million black people from Brooklyn right now. There would be no black people in Brooklyn right now if you did that. So that means that if you...
Check this out, though. They didn't care about toilet bowls and nothing like that because they defecated on themselves.
Yeah, but that means that you lost half your cargo, though. Remember, you trying to sell slaves.
They got all the disease and stuff like that as well.
Right. But also listen to what you're saying. If they defecated, urinated, and vomited on themselves, by the time you got the slaves back to America, if you had a whole boat, let's say you have 400 slaves on the ship, right? Mm-hmm. And it take 3 months for you to get from point A to point B to Jamestown, Virginia, right? No bathroom, no this, no that. That means that by the time you got to Jamestown, Virginia, you only probably had at least 1-2 slaves left. Because remember, these people are vomiting, shitting on themselves, defecating on themselves.
There is aspect to that it's true, but a lot of it is definitely...
What I'm saying is that most of those Africans that you see on that thing were actually POWs from wars in Africa that were basically brought over here to be redistributed into the American culture and were hoodwinked by the Caucasoids that we used as money managers to go over there and get them. And once they brought them over here, they miseducated them, kept them away from us because we wasn't dealing with them because they was prisoners of the war that we was fighting globally. So we didn't really know. And again, the white man is our slave. So he ain't going to revolt against me. So the next thing I know, I go from Africa to America by way of a pen, because at the time that we're talking about, anything west of Mali was Africa. So that means if I took you from Virginia, right? If I took you from Maine to Virginia, I'm still in Africa. I'm still taking you to a part of Africa. It's just that on the map, it's different. That's why when they got the chance to become map writers and all this shit, they turned the map upside down. They started naming places that didn't exist. They started mapping trade routes from maps that were older than they even existed. And then what they then did was spun a story through iconography, through images and pictures, and then killed off the generation that remembered what really happened, and then brought in a whole nother generation of POWs and told them, you're not POWs, you're slaves. You're a Negro. You're this. You're that. And then kept them isolated from everybody else.
The slave comes from the word Slovak.
Yes. So if slave come from Slovak, how could... I'm not Slovenian. You know what I'm saying? None of us are. You know what I'm saying? But Negro slavery, right, came into existence based on what they call chattel slavery. But the first chattel slaves was Caucasians. Yeah, let's end it now because I'm getting hyped. Let's say peace to the House of Consciousness. Thank you. Thank my wife, Selena Cordova L.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank the God. Thank the ancestors. Till again, peace. Hey,
and things that really are irrelevant now. Like
black nationalism is a fucking mind control.
Like the brother saying, man, we at a stage now where everything that these people are doing, they are doing in a preordained fashion. So what we have to really realize is that, like today, you had a bunch of boule, stupid ass Masons walking around here with their ritual, with their cable-toed ritual, dressed like women. And what they're not realizing is the fact that they had to come to the Apollo, ritualistically what they're doing is they're going to Heru. Because Apollo means Heru, which is the god of the sun, which is the original man, which is the original woman, you know what I'm saying, coming together to form Heru, which is the sun, the true Christ, coming through. But these niggas is just like women running through with cables around their neck, thinking that they gonna be initiated into some new order, when all these niggas, these Mason niggas and all these niggas been flashing hand signs and shit for over 300 years, and we ain't no further than where we been. So what we got to realize is that all of the negative paradigms of the old centuries are done. We got to get past all of this bullshit. We got to get past this black-white shit. We got to get past everything that's going to keep us on a mundane level that is going to constrict our evolution as the forerunners, as the archetype of humanity.